Yeah. Hello, welcome to another Office 365 Hours. My name is Christian Buckley. I'm the Microsoft Go-to-Market Director at AvePoint, and I'm Microsoft Regional Director and MVP. And I'm joined today by Adam Levithan. So Adam, hello. He's a fellow Office Apps and Services MVP and a Senior Manager in Product Management for Withum, based in Washington, D.C. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. It's been what, like a year and a half?
I think we caught up on Teams in the middle there somewhere, but yeah, no, seeing you has been a year and a half. It's very strange.
I always say that the power of like the social tools and systems that are out there. Like I had a college roommate, and we were both living in the Bay Area. He moved and back to DC. But it felt like I was talking to him every day via chat and when video came on there in the later 90s. And so we were always connecting. And then I realized at one point I didn't see him physically for about 12 years, but it still felt like we were right there. And so that's why time has no meaning anymore. So we're constantly in contact.
This is very true. Yeah.
Well, anything else that you would say about yourself that you want as part of that grand introduction? Anything else that we should know about you?
Well, no, obsessed with biking, as people probably know if they've ever gone in one of my sessions. Definitely helped me get through the year and a half, not just without seeing you, Christian, but with other few things going on. And lucky enough, Withum is predominantly a audit and tax organization, but growing our advisory. And what I'm a leader of, as you mentioned, my title is our intellectual property. And it's really fun to be able to, and actually we had this conversation when I first transitioned from consulting to product management, but continuing that on and being able to build applications, not as well as AvePoint, of course, but different, tailored to our clients and to needs. So yeah, really enjoying the continued work that we've been doing here and continuing to work with AvePoint and other ISVs to serve the client's needs. No, yeah, that's probably about it.
It's great. And this topic is having transitioned from services over to product. And so you've been on both sides of the fence there, as I have. And the topic today is Microsoft 365 supporting professional services organizations. And of course, there's a rich history. Let's just start there at the beginning and the first question. What has been your experience in providing services within the Microsoft 365 ecosystem? So, we both started in the Sharepoint world.
Well, so how much time do we have to answer this question? No, you gave me guidelines before. Yeah. So, starting in the Sharepoint world, knowledge management, or I could even talk about InfoPath forms too. Whoa. But I think the first, as we know, the power of SharePoint was document management, being able to have everything in front of you, not even talking about intranets, but just, having content in front of you, having templates, the wonderful content types, being able to support repeatable processes. Because as we know, the people are what drives professional services business, and you want all of the individuals delivering services to focus on those services and not to focus on those administration. So we built up from the rudimentary 2003. I admit I didn't work with a predecessor like you did, but the rudimentary.
I came in at the I always thought.
Oh, you were 2003 too.
I was a late bloomer as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, only in 2003. But and that was just about organizing files. 2007 was about adding more attributes. 2010 was about adding search. And then also, around 2010 was really a lot of the focus on the people directory. And that, while I hope not many Microsoft product managers will listen to this, but things have not really changed in that back end in a long time, since 2010, but it's still as powerful. So as we were doing then, we continue to work on importing data from external sources into the SharePoint profile and displaying that content, so that if you need someone who speaks Mandarin, if you need someone who, in our case, has their CPA in New York, New Jersey, California, you can look those people up so that they can work on the clients that you need the assistance, that example in the audit and tax, in those locations. So that's still readily available. I'm very happy that Microsoft still is leaving that gap for us of people directories. So that different type of knowledge, going from just the documents and into the people directory and the people attributes themselves, and making sure they're automated. And then the next generation is now we're building chatbots and reminding, because the common denominator about all that great information is it has to be updated, whether it's a document or it's the skills that an individual has. So using chatbots to say, hey, Christian, I see you haven't updated your projects in a while. What are you working on now? And just through the interface of Teams or through a window popping up on a intranet site, you can enter in and you can update that profile data.
Adam, that does not sound annoying at all.
Well, I did make sure that it's not so no one can anticipate it. It's at a randomly generated time. And yes, it is specifically annoying, but there is benefit. So people don't stop using that solution and then go back to wasting time in email, in Teams.
What observation, Adam, is that, and I'm sure you'd agree with this. I mean, a lot of where the services opportunities, surrounding what is now Microsoft 365, Office 365, SharePoint, OneDrive, eventually, Yammer, and now Teams. But so much of what it was historically was, SharePoint was really marketed as a Swiss Army knife of solutions. You can go and build anything. And so now we're like the opposite side of that, where Microsoft is like, it is not a Swiss Army knife. People ask the question still. You can see questions online in various communities, people saying, hey, I need to go create a ticketing system. Could I build this in SharePoint? And I'm trying to build this. I'm trying to build this, something that we're just like, no, you know what? There are standalone solutions that were built for that purpose, that integrate into the Microsoft stack, or built by partners of Microsoft. That is the preferred way of doing that use SharePoint for its core capabilities, use the products that they were built for, which is not to say you can't automate and integrate and do things. And especially if you have specialized needs in your organization, where you might want to build some IP that is unique to your business, that straddles the various products. Not saying don't do that, but from scratch, just don't go build everything with SharePoint at its center. But is it me, or was that the kind of?
Oh yeah, well, and I think
the center of a lot of the services.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really interesting, and I've had to have conversations with a lot of professional services organizations, and funny too, we work with a lot of accounting organizations because we live it every day and we can assist them, and it's not about competition; it's about serving an organization that wants to be more efficient, and a conversation that I have to have, and most people accept it, is that I'm sorry, you are no different than your competitor, or at least the process of doing a PTO request, and the process of getting a badge, and the process of onboarding staff really is not that much different than your closest competitor. What you deliver is different. So totally agree with you that a lot of these custom solutions were built and everyone was saying, oh, well, we do it a certain way and we need it to be conformed to our specific way of working. Most of those things are not, as you're saying, you can adapt your process to a solution to be able to get the benefit and have your individuals focusing on the delivering piece. That's, in most cases, what differs the professional services organizations. However, I think one thing that we didn't mention is the release of, I'm actually not sitting around wood, but let's just pretend I'm knocking on wood here, the last development model of SharePoint, SharePoint Framework. The introduction of that makes coding, it has SharePoint in the name, but it doesn't necessarily have to do anything except present itself in SharePoint. And actually, as you know, but just to make sure I keep my professor hat on in these discussions, that those apps, web parts, extensions also deploy readily in teams and getting more and more integrated. So you build once and you can access that same tool, app, specialization anywhere that you want to. So it is a little bit of the same mindset, but I totally second what you're saying in the sense that it's changed. It's adapted from this has to be built for SharePoint to be SharePoint supports what I want to build. And now you're able to do that. Now you're able to do that with much less specialized developers. Don't get me wrong, you still need to know some ins and outs, but the presentation layer is more universal. Using the graph is more straightforward than other calls and intricacies that were there before. So yeah, the world has shifted, and meeting the professional services needs again are adopting those best practices, are identifying those little gaps, whether it's with a Power App to make ingesting of a research paper, which you'd be very familiar with, easily, or finding references, or being able to do contract management easier. And I think the biggest thing that crosses the boundary, and what SharePoint was used for before, and now Teams even more so, is extranets and external collaboration. And so what we're working with a lot of organizations with is how, one of the things that makes a professional services organization, besides the people, is programs, projects, tasks, and how do you organize all of those items? Well, Microsoft's done a pretty good job of saying, here is a team. And the team, as we know, has the SharePoint site behind it for the files, and then Planner for tasks, and all of the pieces for conversation and organization. And so how do you work with your client? How do you work with your contractors and partners with that? So that's really
actually,
where we... Oh, go ahead.
And that's actually a great segue kind of into what you're talking about. I know it's overused, but the term, the digital transformation, concept. But so back in the early 90s is where I'm going with this. One of my first projects, I was working for a little company called EDS, if you remember.
Small company, yeah.
And one of the projects that I was working on was moving all of our massive paper-based documentation archives over to a product called DocuHelp. You remember that if you ever worked with that?
Oh,
Anyway,
actually, yes. No, I know what you, yeah,
it's a
the
long
help
time. It's
thing.
HTML based. And yeah, it was a
Right,
long time. This is like 93, I think, when I started working on that project. But massive effort to move that over. That's where I started to get involved with knowledge management and moved into the collaboration space eventually. But the whole idea was we wanted to be paperless. So we were having these conversations in the early 90s. Like, are we living in a paperless society when we have all these different pieces? And this is what I talk about, as I mentioned, the digital transformation. A lot of what we're trying to do with the digital transformation is move us into the paperless world, but then optimize also the level of interaction with those tools, which we certainly see we're improving the interactions. And part of that is an education aspect of it, to train people to stop printing anything and doing everything digitally, but also then optimizing how we work these tools and systems into our business system. So are we in a paperless society? Have we achieved that vision of the future that we had back in the early to mid 90s?
No, and especially not just because we're in Washington D.C. and actually Orlando and New York and working with government contractors. There are so many areas where there is still unneeded paper. And I definitely don't want to call out any specific organizations, but with our close ties to financials of these organizations, invoicing, we've seen the gambit. We've seen physical ledgers that people are recording the amounts owed to them. We've seen printing, as you're saying, and a truck delivering cross state lines invoices from different locations for content to be processed. I think those are really blatant areas, and certainly we're all familiar with those things. Square, just your online banking, and organizations just still can embrace that, and that's paper that, well, it affects only a minor amount of people inside, but let's talk about profitability and efficiency. It's huge. The faster you can get a bill out and get paid, the more money you have to pay people and hire people and expand the business. So it really has huge ramifications. But then, there are definitely some TPS reports out there that people are filling out. Maybe we're a little bit better than in the 90s, where I can use the term paper a little loosely, and people are filling out Word forms. Or we have some remainder, not that there's anything wrong with the tool, but WordPress forms. So they are actually digital, but they're not connected to any other system. So you fill out a form, which is a fine form, but then someone sends the information to someone, or maybe they print it, or maybe they send it to someone else, and there's no traceability. Yeah. So there are a lot of gaps, and it's small areas that take up a lot of time. For the 15 plus years that I've been doing this, onboarding is a really big place and continues to be a big place, especially now when hiring people is harder and it's more important to make a good impression, to make sure that you have everything lined up from HR, finance, and IT, so that person is ready to go, whether they're sitting in the office or sitting at home. So I think that's something that, okay, there might not actually be a physical piece of paper, but there's certainly gaps in the communication. And I don't mean that in any judgmental way. It's just a hard thing to do when you have lots of people at different phases of the process. So that's a huge area to make the first impression. So, those are just two simple examples of finance and HR. We still have some physical paper, and we still have some processes that were let's call them 90ized, right? They were that one step that at least they were copied off of the in triplicate, but there's still a process that it's the way Bob did it, and how Mary guided us, and not necessarily taking into account what is the reality today, and how can we make that painless both for the people who are doing it and for the people who are receiving the benefit.
I mean, do you see, I mean, is that coming up with clients now where they're saying, hey, we want to do away with some of these kind of outmoded systems and processes? Or is it just kind of an unspoken thing that we're just, by step moving away from the paper-based? I mean, even in the examples that you gave them, a lot of those organizations, I have to believe, you'll recognize that the absurdity of having to take a truckload of paper across a state line to deliver an invoice, where you do that digitally and in a much more automated method,
right,
than that truck delivery.
I will neither confirm nor deny how long it took them to recognize that absurdity, but it actually is hard for some of these organizations to justify the sunk costs, because the ROI isn't necessarily right in front of their face. That one, there actually was an ROI, but at the same time, it was working. They were paying for it, and they had to put a little more investment in the upfront automation, but the return is going to come fairly quickly. As most, software doesn't pay for itself in a year. So I think what we're seeing in organizations, really the desire and why we like working with professional services organizations is, and especially the pressure now, is how do we make the current employees that we have at our organization more efficient? And notice that I didn't use the word productivity. I forget if we've talked about this, but productivity is what a boss says, when they're looking at the financials. Me as an employee, I don't use the term productive. I'm not worried necessarily about the bottom line. I just want to, do my work and focus on it. So that's where I like the term efficiency a little bit better. And so it's aligning those, managerial needs and the team member need together.
Yeah, I guess that's the difference, though, is that you could be highly efficient but not very productive in the grand scheme of things. So yeah, and the reverse can be true. So
right.
But yeah, I get the difference there too. Hey, well, I do want to jump over. I think that it's an important topic because of where Microsoft 365 is going, and so much emphasis is moving towards. It's not that nothing has changed. There, the adoption of Teams and SharePoint is more of an infrastructural, but of course, organizations are still building out intranets and extranets, and they have those components, and they're using the various workloads for each of these things. But Teams, of course, dominating the growth story for Microsoft 365. But Microsoft is banking a lot on what's happening with Viva. And so, and Viva now, looking at from product guys' perspective, I mean, there's not a lot there for us to sink our teeth into yet. It's still relatively new, the 4 offerings that are there. But Microsoft, especially now where you're going to start seeing more of the FY22, so their fiscal year just began on July 1st, a lot of emphasis around Viva and building services around that. So how will Viva change the way that professional services organizations, work with the Microsoft stack?
Well, I think we can continue the conversation, and probably why you bring it up is efficiency, right? But it's not in the large sense that we're just talking about. It's in the way we work. And just to remind people, one of the reasons that in February they announced Viva was because they had done a survey that started, I'm pretty sure, correct me if I'm wrong, before the pandemic, but was completed during it, that had concluded that productivity was plateauing. And one of the major reasons that it was plateauing was because a lot of workers, and this was not just knowledge workers like you or I, but frontline workers and retail and all different types of industry, were having to interface with way too many applications. And so the new Microsoft, starting in 2014, is about bringing best of class systems and, admitting and honoring other people who have beaten them, to bring those systems into one interface. And now finally, where we started with the history, that was SharePoint at one point, and they thought we could do apps that brought all these different images and content and data sources. The technology just wasn't there, but now it does exist, and Microsoft Teams and the Microsoft Graph are backed by connectors and organizations, just to name a few, but not limited to, ServiceNow, Workday, ADP, whomever, have worked with Microsoft to have connectors to pull data in. So the number one thing I think about with Viva is having workers work in one place, and you can already do that with apps on the left-hand side or tabs in the teams themselves. And Oliver Workus and I always said we would write an article, and we never did, about context switching, but that's what Viva eliminates, and that's where, yes, it's not a coincidence that it'll be inside of Teams, but it is based on user interaction and usability to have people.
It's also about better understanding how people are working so that you can adjust and refine based on that. I always refer to as the organizational collaboration culture. That's my kind of catch-all for that. But the culture, I always say that there are some organizations that are very email centric, some that are very process workflow centric, some that are very social centric, more chat, connect with people. And even inside a large enterprise, you might have divisions or teams which gravitate to one of those technologies. The hard part that Microsoft is trying to encapsulate is bringing all those together. It's like, that's fine. You could have teams or business units that have these different styles or cultures, but there's a common denominator of data and what's being shared and be able to move across all those things. Now we want to be able to go in and monitor and manage that to see how people are working, to understand. It's not just about, hey, this team over here has shared 10,000 files, but this one's only shared 2,000 files. Why are they underperforming? It's like, well, no. That's not the entire story. But we better understand some of the differences between two highly efficient, highly productive teams and the way that they work and why they might be different, and to learn from that, and not just look at one example and say, hey, that must be the best practice. That must be the effective way to work together.
Yeah, and I think I had wanted to talk about Viva Connections and the dashboard that we're lucky enough to work on. I actually call it the Launchpad, because different than Quick Links, it will allow you to take action directly in the internet. And then Microsoft is providing you the built-in mobile access within Teams. So that, while I did just mention it really briefly, that is a huge piece that Microsoft is supporting, organizations and obviously us as an integrator to be able to do in a much quicker fashion. What you also reminded me of, not just sometimes I call it the personality, and you're right, it's not a personality of a business, but it could be the different departments and its different leaders and different expectations and what they're doing. But what that leads to too is that it's all in one place. And why is that important? Well, security. If we've seen anything from the last few weeks, it's that security is important, and that the weakest link is the individual accounts. And the oil pipeline that was hacked, it was an old administrative account. Actually, it was an old standard account that was obtained, username and password, and then they could slowly make their way through and got administration passwords, shut it down, and cost billions of dollars to a lot of different organizations. So that's amazing. And again, once you have the data, you bring up a really good point. You can work in many different styles now, but you have it all secured in one single way so that your internal team can look at it and secure it how they want to, and have different variations depending on if you're working with external users, internal, highly confidential data, or hey, you know what, it's marketing material. We're going to send this to the public anyway. It doesn't matter. That even those variations can be done, but they're controllable. You can monitor them. I was going to say monitorable. Is that actually a word?
No,
I'm not sure. Yeah,
no.
maybe not. So, I think we're talking about the great things you can do in collaboration, but it also relieves the tension of worrying about security. Now, I'm not saying you still can use great task management tools. You can, as you'd said, look to the partners for tools that provide a specific need. Almost every single one can use single sign-on, and then you're still securing that username and password the same way so that your administration team can do it. So I'm in no way, shape, or form saying only use Microsoft solutions, but it just centralizes how you can manage the infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in the cloud, there's still infrastructure, and the collaboration to give that flexibility to support the business. And with professional services organizations, that's letting your staff not worry about all the things we've been talking about. They just need to do their work. Yeah. Where do they share documents for the project? Where do they put their TPS forms? Can that TPS form be more efficient? Do they work directly with the client there? And as you said, chat and update information. We use, Visual Studio DevOps. Also, if you're delivering code, has a lot of the same great features. So it allows people to collaborate and focus on the work they're delivering.
One thing that just to kind of wrap up, one thing is that there was a lot of fear, I know, within a lot of the service providers that with Microsoft's shift in changes over the last decade, that there was going to be fewer opportunities for professional services working with Microsoft 365. And what's actually happened is it's gone to more of a macro level where they're instead of, not that they're not just building point solutions and helping with specific problem solving with clients, but the broader opportunity now is to say, well, how does what you're doing, these different pieces, which have become so core to so many enterprises, core to how businesses are run, the collaboration and communication capabilities that are all within that, on that shared security model. But it's then given them a purview into that macro view of what is your broader security? How are your other systems interacting with this? If your core intellectual property, your files, your content is being managed here centrally, and we're secure in the collaboration and how that's being stored, then you start looking at, well, how other systems are interacting. Are they meeting those same standards? And so there's a service opportunity and providing that level of audit and then work, undoubtedly that happens because of what they uncover through those audits, through those assessments. So any final thoughts on that services opportunity?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for, organizations like Withum, over the last 10 years, things have definitely changed, and the focus area has definitely changed. And the name collaboration has disappeared, and now it's teamwork and what have you. But it's all the same. It's all the same functionality. No, I completely agree. What the cloud assists organizations that use it and professional services organizations is to focus on more specific areas. As we started the conversation, while SharePoint was a Swiss Army knife, even if you had done things before, delivered a solution before, you'd have to redo it for almost every customer, and there would always be little change here, little change there, and you'd have to update it. Now you have a base of operations. You have transparency, mostly, about where things are going. The Microsoft Graph as a central location for data, effect on what goes in. And I'm not just talking about us as MVPs, but clear line to clients of what they need. And Microsoft is really responding to that And opportunities close, but opportunities open up to really help business again, bridge the gap. Maybe we hit on something, the difference between the middle part between productivity and efficiency and making those the same. Ooh, that's really deep. But for professional services organizations delivering Microsoft 365 solutions, adapting, and some of us have long-standing specialties, and then also for just accounting firms, and actually I even call a lot of not-for-profits, because they're really people-based businesses, are professional services organizations. They just don't account for the profit at the end the same way. For people-based business, there hasn't ever been as much at their fingertips. So us as deliverers can decide which tool. We haven't even mentioned Dynamics, but we're doing more and more in Dynamics, and that's where Power Apps and Power Platform come from. So much opportunity in the ecosystem, and as you mentioned, also tying into other best-in-class solutions outside the ecosystem to allow businesses to deliver their services the best they possibly can. Know what they've delivered, be able to review the data, and know what they can change to be even better the next month and next year. So it's a really fun opportunity, and I think returning to work, hybrid work, you and I can laugh at that. And actually, I had a presentation last year with Dux where working from home, remote work has been growing. I think 100% or something like that every year over year for the last 10 years anyway. So it's not, we just had a little blip, and now we're at a different plateau. So I laugh at that people think this is a new thing, but it's been going on for quite some time.
That's why so many organizations that you hear is fairly common, the transition that was already underway. So once the pandemic hit, there's it wasn't as big of a change as we thought, because we were kind of already doing that. I hear that again and again and again.
Yeah, exactly. And now we call in people like AvePoint to clean up some of the messes that, we were already using Teams, so we just jumped all in. Yeah, you can do that, but where is all your data, and who actually has access to all these things? They're little things. Again, there are always opportunity, not judgment. It was the right thing to do, but to do that long-term sustainability and sanity of IT, and risk of to the CEO, going back in and helping review and adjust some of those decisions over the last year and a half. So it's a fun time.
It's constantly optimizing, so that doesn't change. So
yeah.
Well, Adam, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us. And for folks that want to follow you, find you, how can they find you out in the Twitterverse?
Of course, Twitterverse, at Collab Adam. Just type in my name. You'll typically find my stuff, maybe my brother there too, but yeah, Collab Adam, or LinkedIn, or on Withum, search Adam Levithan, and you'll get all of our Withum digital content out there also.
Well, thanks so much for your time, and thanks everybody for watching. Again, this is Christian Buckley with AvePoint, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.